We are Inside Black and Gold, bringing you the latest and greatest on the Saints as we get ready for Sweet 16 of March Madness. Not distracting us at all. There's plenty of Saints action going on still to keep you busy, in the draft a month away.
How dare you bring up March Madness on this sad day?
Don't get Danny Hurley on me.
Has been eliminated. Yes, Danny Hurley is going to attack you with words, and then you're going to get scared. And I don't know. That's he's so mean. He's so mean to people that they want to take away scholarships and whatever. Whatever. We don't call travels anymore. Apparently in college, it's like, oh, it was fun. Let's not call it. Anyway, that's not what this is about. Y'all have survived. Florida survived, which means y'all have survived the insufferability that would have been me all week if UConn had upset Florida. So you don't have to hear about that, even though you are technically hearing about that. But it's going to end right now because we'll talk about it next year when the UConn wins the championship. Anyway, okay. Saints. We're going to talk about the Saints. This is a podcast about the Saints, and it's been an interesting week for a few reasons. So we're going to go through some of the news that has happened. We still haven't talked about Brandin Cooks. It happened on Friday, midday. So we'll get into a lot of that today. I want to talk about him in the second segment. So we'll get into a little bit of it in the first segment here, but mostly the second segment, we're going to have an interview with Brad Sham, who's the voice of the Cowboys. We'll play that. Had some interesting things to say, and also some quotes from Brandin Cooks himself, talking about coming back to New Orleans. We'll get into our takes about it, all that good stuff. Final segment, I want to get into, okay, what's left to do? Like, what do we see left on the agenda? I don't think there's a ton, but we'll dive into that. That'll be how we close it out. But this first segment, I want to get into kind of news notes, what happened this week. And, so a couple signings, pro day with a big list of Saints attendees. We'll talk about that, whether trading up to number one is actually worth talking about. If we talk about it, then it is worth talking about because we're doing it. Right.
It's a whole multiverse together. Right.
Yes. But first things first, the true gem of the offseason is going to tie everything together. The key, the missing piece to the Saints defense. Ugo Amadi's back, baby. I know everyone was worried, like, what are we going to do without Ugo Amadi manning the nickel spot for the Saints? He's back. Don't you fret. Don't you worry. He has returned. He's going to be on this roster for at least training camp. They signed him to a 1-year deal. Good news, right?
Hey, man, I think that's a good piece. We've seen play, and we know what he can do. And I'm not saying as a starter, but and I think a guy in a pinch that could fill in for you in some other roles is a good comeback. I don't mind. It wasn't a major deal that you inked him to.
Yeah, I'm just joking. I have no issue with it. I thought Ugo played reasonably well. I thought you were
like carrying this angst into, I was like, the Ugo signing. I'm like, what you got wrong with Agent Zero?
No, Ugo's fine. I mean, Ugo's what he is. Yeah, I don't think you want to be starting him, but I think in a pinch, he's not a bad guy to have on this roster. So no, I'm just joking. Like that's really what this offseason has been, though. It's been low level versions of what people probably want, which is exciting signings that they think is going to change things. And in reality, this is going to be a lot more of the same this year, with ideally a scenario that you don't have to start Ugo Amadi because not everyone on your defense is hurt, right? Like that's what you're hoping for. And from the perspective of, hey, I've got a guy who can play inside, outside, who can fill in at safety if I need him. Not a terrible guy to have as a depth piece. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts into this season again on the practice squad like he has each of the last 2 seasons and then worked his way up. But that's that signing, and not really a ton to talk about. I still think I would love to bring in a rookie who can man the slot. Like we talked about in the mock draft, I brought in Jahdae Barron, who would be my day one, week one starter in the slot position. So I wouldn't mind doing that. But right now, I don't think you have a slot corner. So, maybe you say Alante's back in there and you move Ike Adam to the outside, but I don't want to do that either. So we'll see. But
and I think Alante obviously wants to be an outside guy too.
Yeah, no question. We've talked about that. Yeah. So let's move on. The actual signing that is of note, because I think this is a guy you're going to hear a lot about this season, the same way Lucas Patrick ended up being a guy we talked about constantly last year after kind of a late free agency signing. Dillon Radunz 1-year deal, former North Dakota State Bison, also a second-round pick of the Titans back in 2021. If you were wondering, yes, he is a Senior Bowl guy. It's funny because when I look at when the Saints sign guys like this, I always do kind of a deep dive on Twitter to see what people are saying about him. If you're a fan of Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson was a big fan of Dillon Radunz coming out of the Senior Bowl in 2021. He wanted to be a first-round pick. So if you've listened to, I haven't listened to Ross talk about it, but I'm sure Ross is going to be happy about this signing because he was big on him in 2021. He's a guy who's played left tackle, left guard, right tackle. In 2024, he started, I want to say 15 games at right guard. 2023, he started, I think, 11 games at right tackle. He did play on the left side in college. He was a left tackle at North Dakota State. So that is kind of a natural move for him to get him over to left guard. I don't think that's going to be the issue. And right now, I mean, I kind of see it similar to the Davon Godchaux trade, right? Where you get a guy in who's got a ton of experience, has started a bunch of games, and you're not paying him a ton of money. So right now, he would be just like Devon's my penciled in nose tackle. I think Dillon Radunz would be my penciled in left guard starter.
Yeah, and a good, competition, I think, for a guy like Nick Saldiveri to push him maybe a little more. And I know injuries have been an issue with Nick.
Yeah, and I think that's why you can't just go in. Like if Nick had played most of last season as the starter and stayed healthy and done whatever, I think you would have gone into this offseason saying, hey, it's Nick's job to lose. Right. Now it's like, I don't think you can go into this offseason without a viable starting option at left guard. And I think Dillon is that. Like, you didn't want to spend a ton of money and you didn't. I am interested to see what this contract comes in at, because you're right on the fringe of, hey, so you're currently projected for a 4th-round comp pick for Paulson Adebo. So the Brandin Cooks deal, which we haven't talked about yet, but the Brandin Cooks contract canceled out MVS, so that would be your 7th-round comp pick. Will Harris canceled out Justin Reed for the Saints. So you still are on that line of Paulson Adebo netting you a 4th-round comp pick. If you end up with another compensatory free agent, then that would all bump up, and you would lose that line where you would be projected for a 4th-round pick. So if this contract comes in the $3 million range, which I think it probably will, then you're safe on that line. If it comes in over 3.5, closer to 4 million, even higher than that, then that would end up being a compensatory free agent, and that would all bump up. So that's an important number. These other signings the Saints have had, they do not climb into that range. Ike Yadam is about $3 million annual value. I think that's why he got a 3-year deal when you look at it. And I think that's when you look, okay, why does a guy get the contract he gets? Because the comp pick formula is by average per year. And by making it a 3-year, $9 million deal, it falls below that threshold. If it was a 2-year, $9 million deal, it would have climbed up above it. So just something to keep in mind.
They don't. Would they be able to potentially get anything for Lucas Patrick going to the Bengals, or nah?
No, because it all falls below the threshold of like average per year and where, there's a lot of, basically any contract under $3 million right now per year is not gonna land. I think the cutoff, the highest APY for any non-compensatory free agent at this point is Tremont Smith, who at $3.25 million. So as long as it's in that range, you'll be fine. I also wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the reason you gave Brandin Cooks a 2-year deal rather than a 1-year deal for worth whatever. Because like a 1-year, $10 million deal would have probably offset Adebo, and then you would be stuck with the 7th-round pick. So the Saints have never been a team that operates with the goal of protecting comp picks. But I think now, in the range you're in terms of these picks become way more valuable as you try to rebuild, I wouldn't be surprised if that strategy has shifted a little bit.
Yeah, you got to stock that cupboard.
So kind of moving forward, one other thing I want to talk about. So we did mention Brandin Cooks, 2 years, $13 million. We'll talk about that a lot more in the next segment. But the Saints rolled deep down to the Miami Hurricanes Pro Day this week. And, the funny thing is everyone's talking about, wow, they're going there to see Cam Ward. And sure. That's probably true. You're going down there and you're getting a really good look at Cam Ward. what's funny to me is no one's talking about like, hey, there's a lot of players on this on this Miami Hurricanes team that are going to get drafted.
Forget about Restrepo.
There's more. Well, right. Like it's not just Cam Ward that they're down there to see, but like there is definitely some level of, hey, you're sending all these guys down there. You're taking Gail's private jet, and yes, absolutely, you're going to get a good look. They sent Mickey Loomis, Jeff Ireland, Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, Brandon Staley, which would indicate, hey, you're looking at some defensive players too. Brendan Nugent, and then a couple scouts. So, I the question becomes, hey, could the Saints potentially trade up for Cam Ward? Like, what would your reaction be? Like, if the Saints did pull the trigger and say, we're all in, we are going to go get Cam Ward, what would your reaction be?
Clearly, Kellen Moore believes like he's that dude. And the package, though, that you're sending to the Titans, man, you are putting you're obviously a franchise in a huge bind with the amount of capital you're just giving up, or I should say using as ammunition to trade up for that number 1 pick. But I mean, you have to be completely and utterly sold on Cam Ward, I think, in this situation to pull a move like this off.
Yeah, I think it's got to be more than Kellen Moore thinks he's that dude. It's like the entire organization would have to think
right,
he's
everybody's
that dude.
enamored with him.
Like Kellen Moore could love the guy, but if the scouts are like, we don't really like this, we don't like this, we don't like this, then I don't think he it would have to be complete alignment from the top down in order to make that stand up. Because like, what you mentioned it, like what is the package you would have to be sending? And it's massive. Anytime you trade up to number 1 from anywhere, it's going to be massive. But from, if you're moving up from 3 to 1, like for the Giants to trade up from where they are to get Cam Ward, it would be one package. To go twice as far, it's going to be a much bigger package, right? And that's what she said. But so, I went and I looked, okay, what are the examples of trades up to the number 1 spot and where do you balance it out? And the interesting thing is a lot of times you'd be looking at, well, it's similar to this team traded up from 11 or so. So you would say, well, they don't have to give up quite as much, blah, blah, blah. And you can maybe get scrape something back in that conversation of like, well, let's talk about it. In this case, there is an exact replica of this trade from 2 years ago.
Right.
When the Panthers, who were set to pick at number 9, traded up to number 1 to get Bryce Young. So like, if I'm the Titans, I'm saying we're going to start there. That's our starting point.
Hell yeah.
Because it's 2 years ago, and honestly, it's interesting because the last 2 number 1 picks have technically been via trade, because in that pick, this Panthers gave up DJ Moore, first off. So a established NFL wide receiver, the 9th overall pick, the 61st overall pick, which was the 2nd round pick. But so that would be a little lower than what the Saints would have to give up in terms of their 40 pick. Then a 2024 first and the 2024 second. That first rounder ended up being like the worst case scenario is you end up picking number 1 overall and giving that pick away. And that's what happened. So the Bears took Bryce Young. I'm sorry, the Bears took Caleb Williams. But so like, what would that trade look like for the Saints? If you want to keep it on the wide receiver track, you say, hey, Chris Olave. We're going to say it's Chris Olave in terms of that player. And then the 9th overall pick, obviously, the 40th overall pick. And then since you're giving away more value on the top end, you probably could say like, instead of a 1st and 2nd next year, I'll give you a 1st and a 3rd, something along those lines. You could also say, hey, maybe you could scrape back that number 40 pick, give away both 3rds and say next year is a 1st and a 2nd instead of a 1st and a 3rd. But like, no matter what, that's going to be something along those lines in the package. And if you didn't want to give away a player and say all of its assets, then you probably say 9th overall, 40th overall, maybe a 4th round pick, and then next year's 1st and 2nd to match that value. That's the type of package you'd be giving up.
He better be like a Joe Burrow.
Right. He would have to be. And so that puts so much pressure on the situation. Right. If he ends, and that's why like the Panthers felt so hopeless, and they have a little bit more hope now based on how Bryce Young kind of played in year 2.
Yeah.
But like, that's why it felt so hopeless for the Panthers. Cause it was like, okay, the guy you drafted isn't doing anything worthwhile, and you have no picks to build around him. So,
right, and I don't either. Like I said, like you mentioned, I said just Kellen Moore being, enthralled with this guy, but it would have to be a hell of a lot more. Kellen, whatever assistants, Mickey, even probably Miss Gale would, after meeting him and whatever private meetings they've had, it was like, we have to have this guy as the face of our franchise.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, do the Titans want him as the face of their franchise? Because if they do, then it's a non-starter because they're going to take it.
Right.
So the Titans have that inherent, like in a lot of instances, the team trading might have some leverage if the number 1 overall pick is a team like that has a quarterback, right? If for example, this year the Bears had ended up number 1 overall again, they would have been like, well, we know you're not taking that quarterback, right? So there's going to be inherent value in you trading out, because you don't need that quarterback. In this case, they can viably say like, no, we could just draft him. Like, we don't have to take your offer. We can just, so we like the market creates itself. Like the bidding war is actually between the Saints and the Titans and not the Saints and anyone else, which is a tough situation to be in. That's why, like, if you could trade Derek Carr in this scenario, it might actually work. But the problem is the Saints couldn't functionally do that until after June 1st. So it would end up having to be like a handshake, wink, wink, nod, nod agreement. And I don't even know if that's allowed. Like, genuinely, I've never seen that happen.
Right.
Because the Saints functionally could not operate if they had to take his entire $68 million cap hit prior to 2026, which is what would happen unless you waited until after June 1st. And then you could get by with 19 million of it this year and 58 million of it next year. But it would probably grease the skids on some compensation from the Titans because you would have paid his old salary basically, and they would only have to pay him a minimum deal. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be a part of the equation. I don't think the Saints are going to trade for Cam Ward, but a couple other. So it's only happened 3 times since 2001. The other 2 times were in 2016. The Titans did trade the number 1 overall pick to the Rams, who went and drafted Jared Goff. That same year, the Eagles traded up to number 2 to get Carson Wentz. So the number 1 and 2 picks got traded.
What a QB class.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it's interesting because Jared Goff has been really good, but probably not good enough to justify that trade. He did get the Rams to a Super Bowl, and we all remember that one fondly. But in that trade, the Rams sent the number 15 overall pick, and they're going a lot further up. They're 6 picks further to trade. They gave away the number 15 overall pick, the number 43 overall pick, the number 45 overall pick, which ended up being Derrick Henry, a 3rd rounder, number 76 overall, and then a 2017 first and a 2017 third. So it's quite a bit. And so it's actually really impressive that they did get to a Super Bowl considering how many asses they gave up. 2001 is the other. It was the Falcons trading up for Michael Vick. They only had to go from number 5 to number 1. And they sent obviously the number 5 pick, which ended up being LaDainian Tomlinson. And then a 3rd round pick, which is 67th overall. And then a 2002 second. So, you take half the distance away and it becomes a much less expensive trade. So like the Giants could probably make a trade more like this. And the reason the Titans might say like, I'd rather take the Giants trade if they have something on the table of this range, because then I could still go and get Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter or somebody, rather than dropping down to 9 is a much more difficult proposition of like, we're not getting Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. We're getting maybe a Will Campbell or something like that. So like that's all working against the Saints in that the Titans could feasibly just take Cam Ward and say, I don't care. The Giants could offer a better deal and force the Saints to have to give up even more. And then even if neither of those things happen, you would still have to pony up a massive package for this potential trade. So all this is to say, don't hold your breath.
Don't hold your breath. I mean, like I said, I think it would be a lot different if everybody was just gaga over this guy. But the problem is then obviously he definitely has a lot more suitors as well.
I think it would be different if it was like last year and there was 3 or 4 quarterbacks in that range that you could potentially take. The problem is there's only 1. So like it's not like the Giants can just sit there and say, hey, we'll be fine with whoever falls to us. Like, we're not going to waste assets going up and getting this guy when we feel like this guy is as capable. In this case, it's like anyone who wants to go get Cam Ward is going to be in that discussion. And the Saints are, by their standards, pick rich in this draft, but not by the standards you would look at of like, one of the reasons the Eagles were so aggressive in their trades over the last couple of years is they had so many picks to throw out. On the Saints, it's like the fact that they have all of their original picks or most of their original picks plus a third is like, wow.
Whoa, right.
Like they have all their original picks for next year. Still great. That will not be the case.
That was one of the cases too I know the salary cap nightmare was a big one talked about, and everybody was so scared of the Saints organization. But the fact that the trove of picks was still pretty well intact wasn't that disgusting of a destination
for
any head coach coming in. It wasn't like I don't have any picks to work with.
Yeah, I mean, that's helpful. Like when Sean Payton arrived in Denver, by virtue of his own presence, like all those picks were gone. And you're also giving Kellen the pieces he needs to at least have a fighting chance. That's what's happening this offseason, right? You are not throwing Kellen completely to the wolves, but you're also operating within the realm of like, okay, what's reasonable and how can we set ourselves up for success in the future rather than pretending it's all about this year. And I don't think trading everything to go get Cam Ward is that.
Unless they think he's Jaden Daniels.
Right. You would have to view him as like the Andrew Luck level prospect, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If he was that, the Titans would feel that way too. Like if he was such an immensely above the shoulders prospect that you have to go get him, then what are the Titans doing?
Yeah, think about the nightmare they've had drafting.
Yeah, right. And Bill Callahan's probably like, is it Brian Callahan? Which one's I always forget because Bill and Brian are both on there. One of them's the head coach and one of them's the dad who's like the offensive line coach. Right, but either way, whichever Callahan is going to get fired, if they continue to suck, is probably going to be like, why are we giving him to them? Like I want the quarterback. Anyway, that's it. Anything else you want to add on that before we move on?
No, but like we said, there's plenty of more action from, to check out at that Miami Pro Day, other than the big quarterback stud that I know everybody's salivating over. Yeah,
Restrepo and then some of these other guys. Look, that was a good Miami team. Like there's some talent. I think the tight end is hurt. I don't think the tight end is worked out.
No, I think he did run the 40.
Did he run the 40, Elijah? Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I could see them looking at. The last time the Saints went to Miami for a tight end, it worked out pretty well. So. Yeah. And it's like
is he a former basketball player?
It's a good question. He's not 6'8", I can tell you that much. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to dive in to the Brandin Cooks signing. We're going to hear from Brad Sham, who's the voice of the Cowboys. Watched Brandin Cooks play the last 2 years. The halfway archer, because I don't think you're allowed to fully arch anymore. You can only pull it out and kind of, anyway. We'll hear from Brandin Cooks and what he had to say in his quick interview with the media. We're also talking to him on WWL this afternoon. So if you want to go check that interview, we'll probably have aired prior to this podcast posting, but you can find it on WWL.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So definitely go check it out. But otherwise, we will be coming right back. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. You missed it during the break. We talked about a bunch of pizza and how no one down here knows how to cook a pizza well. And no one knows that better than Brandin Cooks, who has been to all these different places and I'm sure has had a lot of different pizzas over the course of his life. That was a terrible, terrible segue, but that's what we're going to talk about. Brandin Cooks back in the reunion. And I think if you looked around the NFL and said, hey, of all these former Saints who have gone elsewhere, who do you feel like might be the least likely to come back to New Orleans for whatever reason? I think Brandin Cooks would be toward the top. Like if you looked at guys like Marcus Williams or, whoever,
Yeah, I agree totally.
Like, I don't know. Like all these guys who got out of town and came back, I would not have had Brandin Cooks high on my list. But it's funny to me because I think if you erase the name off of the resume and said, hey, what do the Saints need? Everyone would have said, hey, I want a veteran wide receiver with kind of some skins on the wall, as Bobby would say, and isn't going to cost a ton, isn't going to break the bank. I think you'd look, it's like, oh, this guy's a 1,000-yard seasons in his career. He's still only 31 years old. Obviously, he's played a ton, but, there's experience there. He's a veteran guy. He'll be a leader in that room. Is reasonably familiar with some of these guys. Yeah, sure. Bring him in. Who is it? Oh, wait, Brandin Cooks? Oh, wait, hold on. It's very much, it's like when you do the blind test for the NCAA tournament and you put their resumes next to each other and it's like, well, who do you think should get in? Everyone would be like, oh, it's this team, but then that's North Carolina. So no, North Carolina's getting, I feel like it's that. Like the name alone is the reason that most people didn't actually predict it. But when you look at like the value of the contract, the experience, the age, it makes a lot of sense.
The question, like you were bringing up, it's like why he wouldn't be on my list. It's just because of the words he had that led him to getting Dell. He didn't push his way out of town, but it just resonates in my head about the closed mouths don't get fed.
Yeah, but here's the thing. All the people that were in the room to hear that?
Gone, right. No, totally.
The only guy left is Cam Jordan. That's it.
And he apparently approached everything as a pro. He's like, they probably said, these comments is like, do you want out of here? He's like, yeah, trade. And I don't know. It seemed very amicable of what happened.
I think it could have very easily gotten acrimonious and kind of cycled out of control. But I think both sides kind of did the professional thing of like, okay, you're gone. Good luck. Right?
Yeah.
And that's basically what Brandin said.
And he left saying, thanks, good luck to you too.
Yeah. And this is what he said when he was asked kind of, okay, what are your thoughts on how your tenure went?
I mean, I think, those 3 years, just the numbers that we was putting up, offensively, was I mean, if not the best, in that top 5 in the league. But, that's what I think about.
How do you feel about the way your first tenure ended here? And
no regrets at all. I mean, it's life in a good way. I think both sides benefited from it tremendously. A lot of great players just came through. I wouldn't have success. The team has had success. No regrets. I mean, there's a reason why I'm back here, and you never burn a bridge. And I was young, and you learn from some things, but no regrets. I don't regret any decision or any type, anything like that in my life. I think they're all just learning tools, good or bad, for sure.
Is that something you realized on the way out, not to burn a bridge, or where would you kind of pick that up?
I think that just in general, my whole life, I think it's unnecessary. Why? It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person, if something happens to the other person. It's just energy that's wasted, right? You wish each other the best in all aspects of life, and you kind of move on. And I think that was the case. I mean, Mickey's still here. These guys are still here, and that's why we're back, because I think we both got a lot of respect for one another. And I think that shows by being back here.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that he makes. Like, it worked out for both sides, and in a lot of instances, you'd be like, "Did it though?" And realistically, it did. Like, you look at it, neither side won a Super Bowl, but both sides of this trade got very, very close. And if you look, okay, so there's a couple fascinating things about how Brandin Cooks has gone. One of them is that this is the first time he's been a free agent, which we'll talk a little more about that. But his first season, so he gets traded to the Patriots, right? The Saints get that first round pick. They ended up taking Ryan Ramczyk, who I think was a fantastic pick. Anytime you can get a multi-Pro Bowler, a guy who's been a star throughout his career, in the last pick of the first round, you did pretty well for yourself. Obviously, people would have wished his career lasted longer, but either way, you feel like they nailed that pick. 2017 draft was a hit from day one. Saints ended up going 48 and like 16 or something crazy. Like, they won the most games in the NFL over the next 4 seasons. Came one egregious no call away from, at one ridiculous missed tackle, Marcus Williams, and one egregious no call away from potentially getting to multiple Super Bowls. I think if they get to the NFC Championship game in 2017, they beat the Eagles. But that's a whole other conversation. They definitely go to the Super Bowl if they get that pass interference call.
They're going to beat Magic Man Nick Foles?
Yes, they would have. Anyway, neither here nor there. Either way, the Saints only got better after that trade and ended up winning a ton of games, going to the playoffs 4 times, winning the division 4 years in a row. Fantastic. Meanwhile, Brandin Cooks gets traded to the Patriots that year, goes to the Super Bowl with the Patriots. Now, they lose to the Eagles that year, and Brandin Cooks gets concussed early in that game. I think if you're the Patriots, you'd be like, man, if we didn't lose Brandin Cooks early in that game on a hit, which I believe was by Malcolm Jenkins, right. Then the Patriots probably think, hey, we probably win that Super Bowl if we had Brandin Cooks, our top receiver the whole game. He had 1,000 yards receiving that year. Great year. The Patriots walked into the Superdome week 2 and beat the Saints. That was the year the Saints started 0-2, which everyone's probably thinking, oh man, it's the end is nigh. Anyway, because that was after 3 consecutive 7-9 seasons. You start 0-2 and then end up anyway. So things worked out for Brandin Cooks. Now the Patriots, who picked up his option immediately after that trade, end up trading him to the Rams the next season. Brandin Cooks goes there. Who wouldn't you know it, ends up back in the Superdome for the NFC Championship as a member of the Rams. They win that game. We don't need to talk about how they won that game any more than the fact that they did. So Brandin Cooks, after that trade, ended up going to back-to-back Super Bowls, lost both. But, yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue that the trade did not end up beneficial for him. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. The Saints have been to none. So, he signed an extension with the Rams. He ended up going to the Texans and then the Cowboys. But I think genuinely he's telling the truth when he says I think both sides are like, you know what? I'm not mad about how things worked out.
What I liked most about his press conference too was I see that hunger still, because he was asked about, not achieving 10,000 yards yet, but I'm being like you on the precipice of that going into this season. And it wasn't like, yeah, whatever, we'll see what happens. But he even mentions I should be there right already, kind of thing. So it's something on his list I think he wants to scratch off.
Yeah, and I mean, this last year with the Cowboys, and so the question becomes, okay,
yeah,
do you have it left in the tank? I kind of look at this contract and this kind of going back similar to Emmanuel Sanders in 2021. I think the reason we're talking about it differently is because it's Brandin Cooks, but going to get Emmanuel Sanders in 21 is very similar to this. Emmanuel Sanders was in his age 33 season when they brought him in, and they paid him a lot more. They paid him 2 years, $24 million. They obviously only got him for 1 year because of COVID and the cap reduction, and he ended up being a cap casualty. But I think you're kind of looking at him the same way. And I think if you're getting the range of 60 catches, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, then the deal is fantastic success.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's got left in the tank from that perspective. He is only 31, but he's got a ton of mileage, right? We talked in the last episode about Juwan Johnson and how he's 28, but there's still a ton of tread on the tires because, his first 2 years in the NFL, he didn't really do anything. Well, Brandin Cooks, he's actually younger than Michael Thomas, but he's played 3 more years than Michael Thomas 4 now because Mike wasn't in the NFL last year. So, you look at it and say he's been durable throughout his career, but he is coming off the first season of his 11 years in the NFL that he played fewer than 13 games. He did come back from that injury and finish out the season with the Cowboys, but 10 games, 26 catches, 200 something yards, a couple touchdowns, not exactly screaming wow, go get him. So I don't know. I think this could end up being a scenario where you're just like, man, he just doesn't have any juice left, and we'll see how that goes.
And when you look at it, reading over some of the stuff from last year, it was a rough season for Cooks. Had an injury, underwent surgery, and then got an infection. So had to have it looked at all over again. It was a mess of a season for him. And I know the way this dude is built, he's going to want to come back with a vengeance this year. So definitely looking forward and hoping that can be in black and gold.
Yeah, and I hope so. I think this team needed a veteran option. Yes, you would have loved kind of a Keenan Allen or
right. I know he's not the big threat, but he's still a viable speed option.
Well, we'll see. That's my question is, are the legs
Right.
still there? Is that speed still there? Because if it's not, then I don't know what he brings, right? But I'm not going to be mad about it because, like I've said all along, like I need them to operate within their means in this free agency so that next year we can come into this regardless of what happens this year and be in a better situation where you can have multiple pathways to take and not just this one narrow road that includes restructuring every contract available and going, with the status quo, right? And I think this does that. I think this kind of splits the difference of, hey, I didn't want to spend $15 million a year on a Cooper Kupp, a guy in a similar situation. I didn't want to spend $10 million a year on a Keenan Allen, a guy in a similar situation from an age and production perspective, right?
Who's still available, right?
Yes, he is. So I don't know. Like I think if you're coming at this from the perspective of I wanted the cap to be clean as possible, while also understanding that the Saints were always going to approach this as let's try to win, then I think this kind of hits that mark. I don't think it's about Brandin Cooks at all. Like again, I think he just happens to be the most
available option
the most fitting option in that kind of pot of players. And obviously it probably doesn't hurt that Mickey and him have a relationship. But I also think, you're coming back and I think people are going to look at it like, he's a locker room cancer. And I think one of the reasons you sent him out was because he was becoming that early in his career. He's been in the league for 10 years now. I think he's been around the block enough times to understand what that means,
right?
And how to be a different player. One guy we talked to was Brad Sham, voice of the Cowboys, who got
great stuff on him.
Yeah, I got into that a little bit. So let's listen to that from Brad.
Just curious, the last 2 seasons in Dallas, how things went. I know the first year put up some good production, and then last season dealt with some injury issues.
Yeah, and I don't think that I think he would tell you this, but I'm not convinced that they really knew exactly how they wanted to use him. 2 years ago, Mike McCarthy took over the play calling and virtually in his telling installed a new offense. He kept saying we're in the first year of this offense, even though he'd been, the head coach for the whole previous time, including when your head coach, Kellen Moore, was the offensive coordinator. And please give Kellen my best. Tell him I said hello.
Will do.
So they stumbled out of the block offensively that first year. And they had a winning record at the bye. But everyone was complaining. They were scoring a lot of points on defense, and their defense was kind of carrying them. And C.D. Lamb complained a little bit about how things were going. So I don't know what happened during the bye in 2023, but they changed something. And one of the things about that first period was it was kind of like they forgot they had signed him. Brandin Cooks. It was like he was a complete afterthought, which none of us understood. And after that break, he became much more involved, and he was a really productive part of their playoff team in 2023. And not only was he, I'm saying all this to heartily endorse the Saints bringing him back at this stage of his career, not only did he have a productive year on the field, the young players, younger than him was almost all of the receivers, and that would include Lamb, they swore by the guy and talked about what a great mentor he was for all of the young receivers, from everything to the way he ran routes and approached things to the way he lived his life, from his role of spirituality in his life. And so he was really a leader and an important part of what they did, and I thought they didn't get nearly what they could out of him. And last year, you said he had some injuries, and then after their offensive line was really in question all year because of the inexperience they were playing. And then once Prescott got hurt, then for the receivers, it's almost impossible to make a value judgment because the whole offense changes when you're on your second quarterback. Even though Cooper Rush had played a good bit. It's just not the same. So I think that Cooks, I'd have been very pleased if the Cowboys wanted to re-sign him. I think that they did not get the most out of what he had to offer in the 2 years he had here. And I don't know that he's your lead receiver at this stage of his career, but with Kellen, I think he can be very, very productive for the Saints.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I think people ask, okay, he's 31 years old. You're talking about a guy who relies on his athleticism, his speed in a lot of ways to be effective. A guy coming off a knee injury, I think there's reasons to be like, okay, well, I'm a little nervous about that. What was the injury he was dealing with last year, and how did he look coming back from it?
Can I tell you the truth, Steve? They had so many injuries. They had, if I were you, I would hope so too. They had so many injuries last year that I cannot remember what injuries one guy had from one time to another. I do think he got hurt early. I think he got hurt in camp, and it wasn't something that sidelined him. So he was out there trying to practice, but it hampered him, didn't let him cut loose, and I think that there was a period of time that he just needed to rehab and rest, and he's still effective in doing almost everything that he could do before, so I wouldn't be afraid to think of using.
All right, again, that was Brad Sham, was the voice of the Cowboys, longtime voice of the Cowboys, with some insight on Brandin Cooks. And I think the biggest thing there that you take away is, okay, is he a leader? Is he going to be a guy that can come into this room? Which I think that's why you need to bring in a veteran. One of the reasons you need to bring in a veteran, because you need a guy who can kind of lead that room. Maybe not from the perspective of being the guy, right? But, being a positive influence on a Chris Olave, a Rashid Shaheed. And it sure sounds like, whether that was the case when he was here the first time or not, sounds like he's kind of grown into that role.
Yeah, and there's a lot of youngsters still on the squad too. I'm anxious to see what like a guy like Bub Means can do in year 2 in the NFL. But you said there were Cooks. That's so vital to me, because that was something I was like, with the attitude I remember in that Saints locker room on his way out, I was like, why would you reconnect with the guy there? And to hear Sham say that about the Dallas Cowboys wide receiver group kind of flocking and rallying to this guy as someone they kind of leaned on, yeah, that's huge, obviously.
Yeah, and so the question becomes, what exactly are you going to get out of him? I think if you can get anything remotely close to what he did in 2023, which was, played in 16 games, caught 54 passes, 657 yards, 8 touchdowns, which is a pretty big number. It was obviously a high octane passing offense for the Cowboys that year. I think that's what you're hoping for. If you get closer to what you got this year, which was an injury-plagued year, 9 games, 26 catches, 300 yards, couple touchdowns, I think that'll be disappointing, and you kind of look at it and say, this didn't go well. But it is what it is. And
when you look at when he was really humming, I don't think we're going to get that guy that's averaging 15, 16 yards a catch. No way. and I don't think if you're going into the season hoping for that, then that's a problem. And that means that Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed did not deliver. One guy who definitely does know Brandin Cooks pretty well is Keith Williams. Brandin Cooks grew up right near where Keith Williams is from. I know Brandon's from Stockton. Keith is from nearby, about 20 minutes away. Said that Keith was recruiting him to go to Fresno State. I'm not going to Fresno State.
Yeah, I did think that was funny. He was like, no, I'm not going to Fresno, but he went to Oregon State, which I wouldn't exactly call a mecca of college football, but it is a higher profile situation. He won the Biletnikoff, so it worked out for him. But so they go way back. Another guy he knows pretty well is Derek Carr. They're both from the same area, and they've known each other for a while. They were both in the 2014 draft class. Cooks went about, I want to say, 20 picks higher. He was 20th in the first round. Derek was, I think, the second or third pick of the second round. But this is what Brandin had to say about the situation he's walking into.
I think we got a great room. I think you talk about CO, like I said, she blazing. CO can run any route and said. So I think we got a great room from that aspect. And it seemed like a lot of guys from the outside, a lot of unselfishness, and I think that's important to start off with. Guys just want to win, obviously take care of business, and let everything else kind of handle itself.
What are your impressions of Derek?
Oh, I mean, Derek, we same class. You know, I've known Derek for a long time from Northern California as well. He can throw any ball, tough cat, and a great leader. You talk about a guy who does so much, for his team and off the field and in the community. Another believer, just a great human being, but also a guy that can, play at the highest level and has been doing that throughout his career.
Another believer. Cooks is another big man of faith. So him and Carr had that connection as well.
Yeah, him and DeMar. Well, I mean, that's the Archer
right.
thing. The Archer thing celebration was a religious reference. I don't know. I don't know well enough to go back into it, but that's like what that is. It's not like a violence thing, which is why it's funny that the NFL
it's not Hunger Games?
No, it's not about the Hunger Games.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. You could say there's some religious references in the Hunger Games if you want any of those intonations there. But that's why it was funny to me that the NFL kind of banned it, because it was like, this isn't a violence thing. This is like a religious thing. But now he can only like pull it out. He can't like release it. But hey, they gave him more leeway than they gave Jimmy Graham's dunks. But yeah, so he did mention that he's another believer. So there's the man of faith thing going on. And the other thing he did mention is that he and Derek Carr have talked, which I thought was notable, because a lot of people have been pointing to like, where's Derek? We haven't heard from Derek at all. Well, Derek is out there clearly talking to his wide receiver. So, it's not like he's like, I don't know. He's somewhere. So
yeah, where in the world was Derek Carr? That's instead of Carmen Sandiego.
But he may be in San Diego. It's entirely possible that Derek is in San Diego.
Very likely.
Anyway, so I don't know. It is what it is. I'm not super excited about the Saints wide receiver room. Not a lot of physicality there. It's going to be a lot of speed, but I'm not. I don't know. Like, you don't have a situation that I think is going to. Yeah, I guess if your goal is Jawan Johnson, that's how I'll sell it, which a $10 million a year contract would seem to indicate you are, then maybe that's why you didn't go out and get a more physical guy, because he's going to be your kind of physical chain moving guy. But we'll see if that actually ends up being the case, because I've thought that was going to be the case before, and it has been.
No, I'm curious to see what Coach Kellen's building here right now. I think that wide receiver, though, this doesn't take the position off the board for the draft, obviously, either.
No, like I've said a few times, none of these signings take any positions off the board.
Right.
Like, there's nothing you did offseason other than maybe. No, I take that back. And there's nothing you did this offseason that takes any position and says, I'm drafting that position, I'm set. Now, at number 9 overall, maybe.
Right.
Maybe. But that's another question for another day. Either way, that's Brandin Cooks. We'll see what happens. I'm not telling you to be excited about it. I'm not excited about it. I think it's kind of like, okay. It's about the lowest level thing you could have done that is above doing nothing. But hey, at least your number 10 jerseys from way back in the day are worth wearing again.
Bringing it back, baby.
It would have been kind of annoying if you had done like the Mark Ingram thing and come in with like 22 or.
Well, somebody had Mark's number, right?
Actually, no, Mark Ingram wore 22. I'm thinking 14. He came in at CJ had 22.
There you go. Right.
And he ended up getting back into 22 eventually. But
the 14 didn't look right on Mark.
Neither did the 5. There were a lot of numbers that didn't look right, but at least Brandon will come back in. So if you have a Brandin Cooks jersey, you can still be
dust it off.
Got it. Anyway. All right. Who dat? We'll be right back. This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to come back and talk about, okay, what's left to do? What do we think is left on the agenda? Not much personally, but we're going to talk about it. Again, this is Inside Black and Gold. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve at Steve Geller, WWL. To review, rating on podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to hear more of, and we'll do our best to get into that. Otherwise, we'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here alongside Steve Geller. One more segment, and what I expect will be a shorter segment, a shortish segment. Now, full disclosure, I say that a lot and then do not deliver on that promise. I did that in the last episode where I said the second mock draft would be shorter than the first, and wouldn't you know it, it was actually a longer segment. So I apologize in advance if I just lied to you, but I don't think we have a ton to talk about, because what we're going to talk about is what's left to do in free agency for the Saints. Like, what is actually left on the agenda? And I don't know. I don't see a ton. But Steve, if there are signings left to be had, if there's moves left to make, what do you think is the top of the list for you in terms of what you'd like to see the Saints address going forward?
I'd like to see if there was someone that Brandon Staley wanted at outside linebacker or an edge rusher to add to this defense right now. There's still plenty of spots that need filling, but if there was a nice veteran presence there that still had some pull to them, I would definitely like to see that happen for the Saints. I know a Baton Rouge guy like Judon's still available. I just don't know if they're going to be in that price range, and he's definitely up there in age too.
I was literally just looking up Matthew Judon because, and yes, he is Baton Rouge native. Where did he go to college? Grand Valley State.
Okay, I was like, I wasn't able to pull it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even been in the right level of conference. Like, what is Grand Valley State? It's got to be like FCS, right?
Let's see.
Grand Valley State,
Division II.
It's Division II. Wow. Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say, like, I'm not even in the right division. I would have guessed somewhere like he seemed like he'd be an SEC guy, but yeah, I mean, a guy like that, he's 32. Has experience as an outside linebacker, right? And that's, if I'm looking for someone to add to this defense, it's gonna be a veteran player with a lot of experience as that outside linebacker. That thing that, you brought back Chase Young, you still have Cam Jordan, you still have Carl Granderson, but none of those guys has played outside linebacker in the NFL. Chase had a little bit of experience being the stand-up rusher out in San Francisco for half a season, but even then, so I don't think it would be a bad thing to bring in someone who can like at least translate some of the differences from the 3-4 to 4-3 for those guys who just will have to do some different things, right? Like that would make sense to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think Judon has any experience with Staley, but having that connection with obviously the new defensive coordinator would be huge.
No, but he was a teammate with Devon Gotcha with the Patriots. So,
right.
There's some connection there. I don't know if they're friends or not. That's one of the things that's funny to me. And I'm guilty of this. It's like we talk about, hey, Keenan Allen and Kellen Moore are on the Chargers together. It makes sense. Bring them in. But what if they didn't get along?
Right.
There's people you work with that you don't like.
Yeah, you go somewhere else. It's like, no, I'm not bringing this guy in.
Right. And we never think about it that way. We always think about like, oh, they cross paths here. So thus it makes sense. Get them back together. But what if like they were completely arguing all the time? And, what if this is like a Michael Thomas, Derek Carr situation? Like, or like even like people, for example, Sean Payton and Mike Thomas, everyone was like, Mike Thomas is going to go out to Denver to reunite with Sean Payton. It's like, I don't think those guys like each other.
On a way different path, even more than ever now. I think Michael Thomas's NFL career is a wrap.
No, he's kind of become, it's like, at what point, how many years do you not play in the NFL before I stop getting tweets saying, should he come back? Like,
right.
Go anywhere. Where is he?
Nobody is talking to this dude.
And when he does come back, he's going to be suspended for a game. And that was stemming from the brick throwing incident. Anyway,
contractor.
Anyway, so all that is to say, yes, Devon Gotcha, Matt Judon were teammates with the Patriots. Now, if they got along, great. If they didn't, I don't know if that's a positive. But either way, so he's a 4-time Pro Bowler, a lot of experience, not a guy who's probably going to come in and need to be a starter. So, like, that's kind of where I'm at. If you can, and I don't think this has to happen prior to the draft. You have some cap space, so you can be a little bit more aggressive after the draft if you manage to avoid offsetting that 4th-round comp pick prior to that. So that's why, like, we have all this cap space. You're looking at it like, why aren't they spending it? I don't know. You don't need to, because there's a lot of these guys, if they haven't signed by now, No one is running to sign him.
Right.
You can have conversations and say, hey, sit tight. We can come back to you. And that's probably the one position, maybe an inside linebacker, but I don't know. I feel okay with the inside linebacker situation right now.
Sure,
Maybe I'll draft a guy. I wouldn't hate using one of those 3rd round picks on a linebacker. Maybe even number 40 if the guy you really love falls to you there. But that's I'm trying. Quarterback. Maybe you bring in a veteran backup. Like what else is there?
I could understand too a veteran backup, but you're not in any rush to do it either. But and I'm not really sure who the hell the names are out there. I know they're not getting a Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers.
No. You've already got your Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers.
Sad but true, dude. Sad but true for sure. But I do think like if you do have a situation where you put Spencer Rattler, or what if he gets hurt or he's just doing horribly, I think you do need to have some kind of veteran guy around. And I don't know, that could be there's not going to be a high level name there. It's going to be some of the guys we've seen in the past here on a veteran kind of deal.
Yeah. So let's see some of the quarterbacks that have not been signed. Carson Wentz, is he still out there?
I heard someone talking to him. I'm not sure if he inked anywhere.
I think he's still a free agent. So like a guy like that, a guy in that range, a guy who started games. Teddy Bridgewater's on this list, which, it's funny.
He's
Teddy Bridgewater, now. It's kind of crazy. Teddy Bridgewater played in the playoffs last year. he joined up with the Lions, led a touchdown drive, and then all right. So anyway, CJ Beathard could make sense. Easton Stick was the backup for the Chargers for a long time. So there's some connection with Kellen Moore there. I'm just saying, I could see a quarterback being added to the room, not because you're trying to supplant a Spencer Rattler, but because, I don't know, Jake Haener doesn't feel long for this roster. And if I'm going to have 3 quarterbacks, I don't need two of those quarterbacks to be guys who have never really done anything at the NFL level from a winning games perspective. Now, I'm willing to stick with Spencer and develop Spencer, but I don't need 2 of those guys.
I feel like we know who Carr is, and I'm curious, like, to be in the head of Kellen Moore and like, what's he thinking about with, all right, this is what I have in Spencer Rattler, this is what I have in Jake Haener, and DiNucci. We also have DiNucci on the roster, I think, still.
You have DiNucci. That's true. I forgot about him. The one interesting thing with Jake Haener, and I'm only bringing this up because the whole connections thing, right?
Yeah.
So Kirby Moore, which is a fun name. I was always a big fan of Kirby the video game. And so Kirby Moore, former offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach at the place Brandin Cooks wouldn't go, Fresno State. Doug Nussmeier is also a former offensive coordinator at Fresno State for a spell. But the reason Kirby Moore is relevant is because Kirby Moore is Kellen Moore's brother. And Kirby Moore, who was the starting quarterback for that Fresno State Bulldogs team back in 2022 when he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, that would be Mr. Jake Haener. So I don't think Kirby Moore is having a ton of influence on the Saints roster decisions, but I'm sure he did have some positive things to say about Jake as it pertains to this conversation at quarterback.
I don't know. The whole situation there will definitely be one we'll follow in camp. But as for, I still think you need a veteran arm. I don't know. I would feel more comfortable at least.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
And it could be just a camp guy you got on speed dial afterwards. Like, who the heck did we have around
Nathan
last
Peterman.
year? Yeah, Peterman.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think you brought in the offensive lineman you're going to bring in. I think you have enough bodies there right now. Like, you still draft a guy or multiple guys, but I don't feel like that's somewhere that you're still looking. I think that's why you brought in Radunz. Yeah. There again, we mentioned, there's some other names at edge rusher, but I'm not going to just throw them at you for no reason. Wouldn't mind another 3 technique guy, a defensive end type interior lineman. But the other position that I'd look at is safety, because I just don't think you have the numbers there right now.
No, there's a big drop off after Reed and Matthew, man. We don't know still much about Howden.
I mean, I think we do know enough about Howden, and it's that he's just not. I mean, he's a good special teams player, not a terrible guy for depth, but he's definitely. I don't think he has a starter ceiling. I think if he had a starter ceiling, you would have seen that last year. He's constantly out of position, and I like Jordan. I think he's got a good attitude. I think he's a guy that's going to have a career as a core special teamer. I just think he's more in the realm of a JT Gray than a guy you have in your safety rotation. So I don't know. I'd like kind of a more of a box safety. I think that's what they're missing. That's what Will Harris did well last year. I don't think you needed to spend what they spent, what the Commanders spent to get a Will Harris type player. So that's probably what I would look at. It's kind of a box safety, kind of a big nickel type guy. Someone you could throw in that spot and be a tackler, be basically a small linebacker. That would be my last thing. That's I think edge rusher and an actual edge rusher, like outside linebacker, maybe a veteran quarterback and a box safety are my three things.
We were talking about quarterbacks and what pops up on my Twitter feed, someone talking about Zach Wilson. And that'd be kind of interesting. A guy that, he's been around the league, but he's still looking to prove something too.
Yeah. See, I don't. So when I say quarterback, I say, hey, if I'm in a situation where I need to start someone,
you're looking more like an Andy Dalton. Then you want a guy that's been there, done that, and can win games.
Yes. The type of quarterback the Saints typically had as their backup prior to last year, right? Where you always had like a Teddy Bridgewater, a Jameis Winston, a Trevor Siemian, so I just don't, I think if you did want to go that route, I think that's probably someone you could see. But I'm not just bringing in guys I've heard of, right? Like a Zach Wilson, I guess he has started a bunch of games. So if that's what you're looking for, but.
Yeah, I don't know if you're getting really, who's going to start? Is it going to be Spencer Rattler or Zach Wilson? Ooh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm onto the Zach Wilson tier, then I'm probably just going to say, hey, Spencer's just as good of an option.
Right.
Like, I'm not just looking for a guy who started a bunch of games and was bad. Now, you could say the same thing about Carson Wentz, but Carson has had some understanding of success in the NFL. So
ever since that Ian injury, though, he's never the same dude.
It is really crazy, you know, and I don't know if that took something away from him, but that team was like 13-1 or something like that. And he got hurt and he's never been the same. It's like Nick Foles just like Space Jammed him.
Yeah, he's totally sucked his life, his career or whatever, his track, where it's like that should have been me.
All of his mojo,
right,
gone in that one moment. And he threw a touchdown pass with a torn ACL, and then he came off the field all wobbly. I remember that vividly, and I was like, "Wow, what a bummer! Their season's over." Turns out.
And Wentz was the backup to Mahomes in the Dome for the Super Bowl, and couldn't get it there either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did get it with the Eagles.
Yeah.
He's got a ring. One thing that Carson Wentz and Ian Book can both say to each other is, we have Super Bowl rings.
I guess even though he was hurt, he gets a ring there because he did help lead them to the game.
Oh, yeah. Your backup quarterback gets a ring. Totally. Now, Ian Book probably doesn't deserve one because he never even was, considered. I think he was practice squad. But most teams will give their practice squad players Super Bowl rings, which is only right. I mean,
Monday Night Football against the Dolphins. Still, I feel like Ian Book never recovered from that. First career.
To be fair,
start.
I don't know if he's gotten a chance to recover from that. I don't think he's ever gotten to another game. Which, man, what a rough, COVID did a lot of weird things. One of them was forcing the Saints to, I can't think of an example of a guy getting thrown into just an absolute hornet's nest more so than that. Like there's times where you'd be like, wow, okay, any opportunity is an opportunity.
Sure.
That wasn't an opportunity. That was a bloodbath. That was it's like you say, he ran into a buzzsaw. Well, this buzzsaw was sitting there staring you in the face saying, come run into me. And you had no choice but to run directly into it.
on the
knowing
big
full
time
well you're just
national
going to get
stage,
sawed in
everyone
half.
watching.
They had players getting fitted for shoulder pads the morning of the game that there were players in that game. Like someone shared a clip from that game. And I was just like, you could give me 100 guesses. I wouldn't be able to tell you who that guy is because he was a guy they signed that morning and played in the game. Never seen anything like it. Anyway, poor you.
Good times. Not.
First pass of his career was a pick six. And the crazy thing is, I think they had a chance. They still were in that game. Like
First career pass, a pick six, and the book was written right there.
yes, all the puns came to an end.
Yeah, exactly.
The book was closed. Anyway, that's it.
Super Bowl champ, though.
Super Bowl champion Ian Book. Can't ever take that away from him. All right, that's it. That's all I got. You got anything else?
No, sir. 1 month to the draft. Let's go.
Good stuff. All right. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. We'll be coming back later in the week. So I have a new voice that I'm going to bring on. Steve, you're going to be busy that day. So it's going to be kind of a trial run. We'll get into it later in the week. This is actually news to you. I haven't told you this yet, but we have something in the works. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll get to it later this week. Otherwise, make sure to check out Sports Talk on Tuesday, which realistically speaking, you won't be able to do because it will already have happened. But Brandin Cooks will be on. So if you want to hear an interview with Mike Detillier on WWL Radio with Brandin Cooks, go check that out wherever you get your podcast. You can also check it out at WWL.com. And otherwise, hey, we're just inching closer and closer to the draft. Who's not excited?
Hey, it's big time doings, like we mentioned already, that the Saints have a stock full of draft picks to make. And it'll be amazing if we do get to see them select them all.
All 9. Make them, baby. Bring them in.
Load them up.
All right. Who dat? Go Saints. Easy, y'all. Peace.
Take care.